It was a quiet September morning in Beverly Hills, 1971. A few mourners gathered at the Church of the Good Shepherd, most of them old colleagues, distant acquaintances, or curious onlookers. There were no cameras, no studio executives, no headline tributes, just a closed casket and a few whispered prayers for a woman once hailed as the next Audrey Hepburn. Her name was Pier Angeli. She was 39 years old. To the world, Pier Angeli was a shimmering screen presence of the 1950s, a delicate porcelain beauty with soft eyes and a voice full of emotion. She had shared scenes with Paul Newman and Kirk Douglas. She had loved and lost James Dean. She had captivated audiences from Rome to Los Angeles. But Hollywood, as it so often does, moved on. Pier's death was ruled a suicide by barbiturate overdose. But questions remain. Her body was discovered alone in her Beverly Hills apartment. No note, no explanation. Some claimed it was a cry for help that went unanswered. Others whispered of deeper pain and even darker possibilities. How did a woman so full of promise fall so far? In the next hour, we journey through the life and death of Pier Angeli, a star born in Italy, consumed by the American dream, and extinguished by the same system that once called her its treasure. Her story is one of tragic love, fame without protection, and a haunting silence that still lingers, because sometimes the spotlight doesn't fade. It devours. Pier Angeli was born Anna Maria Pier Angeli on June 19, 1932, in Cagliari, Sardinia, Italy. She was one half of a pair. Her identical twin sister, Marisa, was born just minutes later. From the beginning, the two were inseparable, like mirrored souls moving through a fractured world, still reeling from the trauma of World War II. Their family moved to Rome during Pier's childhood. It was there, under the golden Italian sun, that fate intervened. A film director noticed the luminous young teenager and cast her in a small Italian movie. That role would change everything. Hollywood came calling. In 1951, MGM brought her to America and rebranded her. Anna Maria Pier Angeli became Pier Angeli. Her breakout role came in Teresa, a modest film about a young war bride trying to build a new life in America. Her performance was raw, aching, and unforgettable. She won a Golden Globe for Most Promising Newcomer. With that, Pier was launched into stardom. The studio system of the 1950s had a recipe. They saw Pier as the embodiment of European chastity. Fragile, gentle, and unspoiled. She was not allowed to age, to misstep, or to speak too loudly. She was put in tailored dresses and posed next to leading men who towered over her in every magazine. She was Hollywood's ill-courted innocence. Behind the curtain, MGM shaped her every move. Her contracts dictated her public behavior. Her interviews were carefully crafted. Like Judy Garland before her and Britney Spears decades later, Pier became a brand before she became a woman. The world saw grace, but they didn't see the pressure. They didn't see the loneliness. They didn't see a teenager living alone in a foreign land, being asked to smile through every tear. She was young, beautiful, and already breaking. In the early 1950s, Pier Angeli met James Dean. He was not yet a legend, just a restless, intense young actor trying to prove himself. She was a rising star with a public image she had to protect and a mother who guarded her like a fortress. But when they met, something clicked. Pier would later say she had never loved anyone as deeply. Their romance was passionate, poetic, and doomed from the start. They shared drives up the California coast, They whispered to each other in quiet corners of diners. They talked about escaping, running away from the pressure, the lies, the spotlight. But Hollywood and her family had other plans. MGM allegedly warned Pier that Dean was too rebellious, too unpredictable, too dangerous to her image. More crushingly, her strict Catholic mother reportedly disapproved of Dean's lifestyle, calling him unworthy of her daughter. Under pressure, Pier broke things off. Soon after, she married singer Vic Damone. Her wedding was extravagant, orchestrated for the press. James Dean, heartbroken, reportedly watched the ceremony from across the street on his motorcycle. Some say he wept. Others say he drove away like he always did, angry and wounded. Pier's marriage to Damone was troubled from the beginning. She would later describe it as cold and violent, alleging emotional cruelty and volatility. She gave birth to a son, but the relationship soon unraveled into bitter arguments and eventual divorce. Yet, in interviews, she kept returning to James Dean. Even after his death in a car crash in 1955, she would call him her one true love. "He was the only man I ever loved," she once said. Everything else was just acting. Hollywood took her youth. Vic Damone took her peace. And James Dean took her heart to the grave. The 1960s were unkind to Pier Angeli. Her roles became fewer. The scripts became weaker. Hollywood was moving on to new trends, new faces, new obsessions. Pier, once a cherished ingenue, was now considered yesterday's news. She tried to revive her career in Europe, where she had more freedom and less scrutiny. But the industry had changed, and so had she. There were rumors of depression, of emotional breakdowns, of drinking, of sleepless nights. She married again, this time to Italian composer Armando Trovajoli. But the union eventually ended in another divorce, another child, another heartbreak. Custody battles followed, public spats with her ex-husbands, tabloid stories that painted her as unstable, unwell, or washed up. But few paused to consider the truth. She was alone, exhausted, and discarded by an industry that once called her a miracle. Pier never stopped working entirely. She appeared in lower-budget films, mostly European productions. Her name was often listed far below the title, barely mentioned in promotional material. Still, she persisted, out of necessity or perhaps habit. The work, even when thankless, was the last thread connecting her to the life she had once dreamed of. She moved into a small apartment in Beverly Hills. Neighbors said she kept to herself, quiet but kind. Sometimes she was seen walking alone, other times at the pharmacy. She looked tired, they said, older than her years. Those who knew her described a deep melancholy that lingered just beneath her smile. There were attempts to reach out to old friends, to reconnect with her twin sister Marisa, who remained mostly out of the spotlight, but the calls weren't always answered. The silences grew longer. By the time the 1970s began, Pier Angeli was a ghost of her former self. Fame had given her everything and taken it all back. She was just 39, but in truth, she had aged decades. On September 10, 1971, Pier Angeli was found dead in her Beverly Hills apartment. The official cause, barbiturate overdose. Suicide. But the details remain murky. She had reportedly spoken with friends just days earlier. There were no dramatic warnings, no letters of farewell. Just a handful of pills and a silent end to a once luminous life. Authorities quickly ruled the death a suicide, citing her mental health struggles, past breakdowns, and history of loneliness. But some who knew Pier refused to believe it. One note, reportedly found near her belongings, read simply, "I want peace." But the official reports left room for doubt. The dose of pills, the timeline, the lack of a suicide note, all raised eyebrows. Some whispered of accidental overdose, others suspected foul play. And still, others believed it was a final act of surrender, a slow-burning cry that had gone unheard for too long. Her twin sister, Marissa, has rarely spoken about Pier's death in detail. In a few interviews, she acknowledged the weight of grief, calling it a wound that never closes. But she avoided speculation, choosing silence over scandal. Hollywood, for its part, barely noticed. There were no tributes, no retrospectives, no sweeping statements from studios about a life lost too soon. Just a footnote. A reminder that even stars can disappear without a sound. Today, Pier Angeli's name is rarely mentioned. She is not listed among the greats. She doesn't appear in most gone too soon montages. Her films are seldom streamed, and her face has vanished from the red carpets that once worshipped her. But those who remember do so with reverence. Her life, like so many others, like Judy Garland, like Marilyn Monroe, like more recently Britney Spears, tells a familiar story, a pattern. Hollywood offers dreams, but sometimes it delivers destruction. Pier Angeli wanted love. She wanted art. She wanted peace. And in the end, the camera turned away before she found any of it. She was more than a tragic figure. She was a sister, a mother, a dreamer, and a survivor, until she wasn't. And her silence, like her death, should haunt us. Because every time the industry forgets a woman like Pier Angeli, it proves that fame is not a promise, it's a gamble. And sometimes it's a death sentence. If you found this story as haunting as we did, please like, comment, and subscribe. Share Pier's name, let it echo, because some stars, even in silence, deserve to be remembered.